another episode of Stoke Meter, and I must admit, I am a little geeked out with our guest, Liz Wiseman. Liz Wiseman is, in a sort of sense, I'll go on a little hero worship here because I was in an HR for a little bit. She wrote a book called Multipliers, and we'll get into a little bit about that in a moment. But Liz is also the CEO of the Wiseman Group, and I shamelessly stole this from Wikipedia. But in and of itself, it's a leadership research and development firm. Aside from Multipliers, she also has written a number of other books. One of the other ones is The Multiplier Effect, Tapping the Genius Inside Our Schools, and Rookie Smarts, Why Learning Beats Knowing in the Game of Work. Doesn't that sound so dorky? It sounds so contrived. Sorry about that, Liz. But with that being said, she is also recognized as one of the top leadership thinkers in the world, and it's obvious once we get into this why. And Liz, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show.
Well, I'm really delighted to be here. You two are fun.
Well, I can't help but we can't help but be pretty excited because of everything that you've taught us, not personally, but through your books and a lot of your talks, and just seeing how it's impacted organizations across the world. But even from a very personal level, man, some of the things that you've written. First of all, I've got to thank Sean Vanderhoven for even putting us together here. Great guy.
Can I just put a plug in for Sean Vanderhoven? Might be the best human being in the world. Like I've been working with him for 6 years, and I cannot think of a bad day that I've had with Sean Vanderhoven. Like every day is a good day with him, and he's fun and funny and gets the job done. He's like,
what a compliment for a person.
Oh,
never had a bad day with him. Man, if anybody could live up to that, that's pretty impressive. That's a high compliment.
Yes, and Gary, you got to meet him sometime because I call him Permagrin. He's never nuts.
He's kind of like you, Mo. It sounds like something you guys get along with.
He's another level because even when he's in the most intense focus, he just has this grin. It's a calming effect. I don't know how else to describe it. So, Sean, if you're listening, sorry we're harping on you there.
Well, and I have to say that I was looking at one of your TED Talks, Liz, about kind of being a kid when it comes to leadership and that type of thing, and all of a sudden I was like, we're all going to get along really well. Reese and I have been kind of accused of being a little on the lighthearted side.
Well, here, can I just say a word about being lighthearted? Every time I do a piece of research, it points to two kind of factors. One is curiosity, just like the value of kind of moving through life, being more interested in what you don't know than what you do know. Like that just keeps coming up over. Sometimes like doesn't matter what I research, somehow that is one of the factors in good leaders and great contributors. And the other is a sense of humor. I found it to be one of the top qualities of multiplier leaders, but maybe perhaps better said, it wasn't that it was a top quality of multiplier leaders. Having a sense of humor is the most negatively correlated characteristic with diminishing leaders.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're not funny. We know this. We know these leaders like suck the life out of a team, and that like you don't ever see them laugh. In fact, it's one of the things I tell people when you go and look for a job, like watch to see if anybody's laughing and having a good time. If they are not, you do not want to go work there. And then the other thing I found studying what I call the impact players of the workplace is one of like the 5 big differences between them and kind of the ordinary contributors is that they make work light for everyone.
Yeah.
Like they're easy to work with, they're fun, they can take like really hard work and manage to have a good time and help other people. Like they just sort of lighten the atmosphere, lighten the load. So that's why I love hanging out with you guys. So on to whatever you want to talk about, but I just wanted to say, like, it feels great to be among people who are having fun while they're working.
Well, it's funny because you actually, I was kind of making some questions. You actually answered a couple of my big questions.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Yeah, okay, good. It's good talking to you. No,
well,
but isn't it so?
Who you are, Liz? Everything that I've ever seen, I saw some of the same talks, but and the book doesn't do you justice. I don't know why they make authors do serious smiles. Yeah, but every time I've seen you everywhere, you do bring that the Stoke effect is what I'll call it. You really do, and you as soon as the audience sees you, you just instantly put them at ease, and it's something that I've tried to convey in not only the thing. I do some consulting on the side. I have my own company now with a business partner, and it's been a blast. But we do utilize that. Hey, if they're having fun, it's amazing how the work structure goes so well. Everyone gels together. And the one thing that one client said is, I never feel under the gun. Even though we're getting internal pressure, when we talk, we feel good, and we can go to the next step of the strategy, and we can adapt without feeling like we're failures. And you automatically convey that, and it's something that I appreciate everything that you've written, because it does make everyone around you better. I want to repeat myself so many times over the course of this interview, because it's so true. I've seen it over and over and over again. What you've researched has actually been put into action, and I completely appreciate that. But with that long diatribe, you did bring up youth, Gary, and youth. What amazing teachers, right? Amazing teachers. You spoke of Larry Gelwicks, and Larry Gelwicks is a personal hero because I'm actually a rugby coach.
Wow.
Yeah, and I coach, and not only rugby coach, a girls rugby team. That they teach me every day. I have never seen more resilience, more grit, more coming together, learning. They make each other learn from their own failures, because they don't consider them failures as rather versus opportunities to better themselves. And when they're having a bad day, it's amazing to see, hey, you gotta quit that stinking thinking, old Zig Ziglar phrase back in the day. But it's so neat to see what the youth are capable of. And I know you've worked so much with adults and leaders and such in giant organizations, but what can we learn from youth in your view?
Well, so I think there's like two sides to this mirror. Like what we can learn from youth is kind of how youth approach things, just delighted. And when I think about kids when they're young, what they want to do? They want to work, they want to contribute. And it's one of the things I have learned studying some of the best leaders, studying some of the worst, because they go together to really understand it. I've studied some really monster leaders, and studying some of the top contributors, and then people who are kind of stuck going through the motions. Is what I have learned is that people every day want to come to work to contribute, and to contribute at their fullest. And when they can, like in the workplace, adults, they describe it as a little bit tiring, but totally exhilarating, thrilling, fun, energizing. And when they can't, they describe it as exhausting, frustrating, demoralizing, tiring. And, we often think, no, people don't want to work. The people on my team, they're not, they don't want to give it their all. I've got to motivate them. And I think like we enter into this world wanting to work, and wanting to make a difference, and thinking we can do things that we don't know how to do, and being delighted in learning how to do things, and not being ashamed of mistakes, and being willing to push back. And like one of my favorite images is like a 3-year-old. Well, first of all, I love the 3-year-old phase. Like everyone in the world can send me their 3-year-olds. I love them. They're little delightful monsters. That's when they're learning like to push back and like, whoa, for 2 years, I thought you were the boss of me, mom, dad, like suddenly they realize I'm actually the boss of me. But I love this image of when a parent or anyone tries to do for a 3-year-old what the 3-year-old can do for themselves. There's this universal reaction. They go, no, daddy, I do it. I do it. Me. Like, and they're like, I can do this. And at work, you get so many people who are stuck under these diminishing leaders, and they're like, my boss is a tyrant, and they're micromanaging me, and they jump in and they fix everything. And I think a lot of people need to assert their capability. Like, no, I don't need a rescue here. Like, you can cheer for me when I'm done, but like, I've got this and I'm going to do it and I can do it. So there's a whole set of things that we can learn about from kids about how to like show up in the workplace and do great work and work brilliantly and joyfully and courageously.
Yes.
But I also think there's something else, and I hadn't really thought of it until you asked this question, is I think we can learn a lot about leadership from how we react to young people.
I agree. Yep.
Yes.
So, when someone screws up in the workplace, we're like, do I say something? Do I just sit back and annoy? Like, do I really lay into them? Do I let it like, and we're just all consternated about how do we do this? And if we just responded to people in the workplace the way we respond to our kids when they make mistakes, we don't grind them into the carpet. Like, you say, no, not that. And you kind of pick them up and you point them and we just cheer them on.
Yes. Yes.
And like, in some ways, we just should lead people on our team the way that we respond to young people when they're afraid to do something hard.
Yes. Yes.
We're like, you know what? You can do it. But you don't put them in situations where they're going to fail. But you also don't let them just stay doing things that they've always done. You're like giving them these layers of challenge. So I don't know. I think they can teach us a lot about what good leadership looks like.
100%. And one of the questions that kids ask me all the time, my kids we coach, is why.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Why? Yeah. And the thing is, they feel comfortable to ask that because it's so, they want to truly understand how it all fits. And I found in organizations, they don't go, okay, I'll go do it, instead of asking why. And the magic of kids are, to your point, 100%, we could learn so much.
And as a parent, we're challenged by this. I remember once taking she must have been about 3, but it was that peak why stage. And we're out walking in the neighborhood and I'm annoyed with all of the whys. And I just start counting them. And I stopped counting when she asked, like, Mom, why are there cracks in the sidewalk? Why are they walking there? Why? 80 times. And what it does is, as a parent, is it really keeps you out of this mode of like, because I said so. But yet in the workplace, we feel perfectly compelled to say, well, because I said so, because it needs to be done. And I think it teaches us to step back and say, if you give people context and explain why, and explain like who and what's at stake, like here's why we need to do this, and here's who is going to benefit from this, then they're like, oh, great. It's almost like, hey, kids, load up in the car. Well, why? Versus like, hey, we're going to grandma's birthday party. And then they're like, boom, I'm in.
Well, and I'm gonna divulge something about me growing up and I'm absolutely 100% serious with what I'm about to say. I'm not even exaggerating. I thought when I was a teen that at some point, probably in my early 20s, someone's going to pull me into a side room and say, okay, Gary, we're going to tell you what it means to be an adult. And we're going to give you all, like, okay, you're not a kid anymore. You know, this is what it looks like. That hasn't happened yet. At least not for me. Maybe if you guys did, you're better than me.
There was
I
no
guess my
adult
point
license
is,
test.
yeah, I think in a lot of ways, well, I think we're still all those second graders playing in the playground. And I don't care if you're 70-year-old or 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it that way too, is people know when you're sincere. You know, as if you're in your child mode, or if you're dealing with a child, they know if you're just blowing smoke or not.
Yes.
And I think that that translates so much into leadership where, and I think that comes with a sense of humor, because when you're joking with people or you're lighthearted, it's a way of showing that you're sincere. You know what I mean? So maybe that kind of ties into that, you know, the power of good leadership that you talked about. But I don't know. Did you guys have that conversation yet about being an adult? Because it hasn't happened to me yet.
No, and I think it's actually helpful to remember that, like, even our elders are still kids at heart. Like, you hear about like these siblings who are like 84, 82, and 80 years old, and they still have this like childhood pecking order, like, no, listen to me. I'm your senior. And one of the things I've spent a lot of time studying, I haven't really written about this per se, but I think it's because when I joined Oracle and I got thrown into a big adult job when I'm still a kid. And so I'm now working with people who are 20, 30 years my senior. And one of the things I realized is they're like just kids too, and they're figuring it out. And maybe I'll share just like two quick stories. One was when I'm at Oracle and I'm meeting with our president, our chief financial officer, our chief technology officer, and we're like a $25-30 billion company at the time. It's a big company. And I've been working with them on this program, and like where we, a leadership program, and we're teaching our strategy, and the strategy is not coming through right, and it's not clear. And we're getting really bad feedback. And I'm kind of beating these guys up every time we run the program. Like, guys, the strategy is not clear. Guys, we have a problem. Guys, we need to fix this. And I was really beating them up. And the CFO was my boss. And he just like turned purple during the meeting, and he just blurted out, he's like, Liz, you can stop beating us up. Like, we know there's a problem. And of course I'm thinking, well, I was having just a little bit of fun doing that. Like, and he goes, we get that there's a problem. Like, the thing is like, we don't know how to do this. We understand the strategy is not clear. And I'm like, what is he saying to me right now? Yeah. He's one of the C-level officers of this $30 billion company. And he's like, we've never set this strategy for a company this large. And then he turns to the president. He's like, hey, Ray, have you ever done this? And he's like, Ray's like, I've never run a company this big. He's like, hey, Gary, how about you? And he's like, no, I don't. I'm just like, I was a programmer, and now I'm the chief technology officer. And I can't emphasize enough, these three men were men I had deep, deep, deep respect for. Yeah. Each one of them was a fine leader and an executive, but they're like, we don't know how to do this. Like, we're just trying to figure it out. And then as he's sort of calming down, he's like, Liz, if you could help us like learn how to do this, well, that would be helpful. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, even like the bigwigs, the people who are in charge, who seem like they have it all together, who seem like they have answers, they're just learning too. They're new to this. And like him saying to me, like in this very sort of, I wouldn't want to say a vulnerable moment. I think that term's overused. I think it was just this like childlike sense of, I don't know how to do it. I'm like, oh, that's such a beautiful thing. Like, how courageous, like, yes, now we can solve the right problem. And it taught me that these people we often look up to and expect them to have answers and be adults. Yeah. Well, they're still kids. And let me share one more example. And I don't know if I've ever told anyone this, but it sounds like trauma, but no, it's, I went up to speak at a bank in Canada, and we were kind of doing the final tech check before it. And one of the people who was responsible for the learning function in this group he saw that I was going to like leave the stage, and he says, "Oh no, you can't leave the stage. You need to stay on the stage." I'm like, "Oh, we're actually going to get some conversation going." And so this was a program for their top executives. This is banking, and they're all sitting in these round tables. And I was going to go and like get them talking, and he could, I think, tell there was probably going to be some laughter involved. And I was going to ask him to like do this, this, and this. And he was having none of this. Zero. And he's like, basically, to cut it short, he was saying, basically said, like, you cannot leave that stage. I want you to stand on that stage and give a keynote address to these executives. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this and this. And he's like, no, I forbid you, basically.
Wow.
And then what I said to him is, I said, do you think that what I'm going to do and the way that we're going to have this conversation, I said, do you think it's childish? And he said, I do think it's childish. And these are our most senior executives, and they will think it's childish as well. And then I said, well, it's been my experience that like even the most senior executives like enjoy having some fun while they're learning.
Yeah.
And I mean, we weren't gonna like we weren't doing Legos, or we weren't wearing party hats or anything. We were just gonna have some like lighthearted learning and discussion. And he was still like 10 seconds before I'm going on stage, like, don't you leave the stage. And I'm like, I'm gonna leave the stage. And because I wanted to be honest with him, which is I had no intention of complying with this. And we did the program, and the executives, like, they had so much fun. They were animated, engaged, they were learning. And I come off the stage, we finished, it was like, I don't know, an hour, 90 minutes. And to his credit, this man who was there waiting for me, like he was kind of like waiting to arrest me, take me back to like bad speaker, jail or something. And he said, you're absolutely right. That went extremely well. And it's just, I share this. Well, first of all, so like anyone who's thinking about hiring me and making me like stay on a stage, I will not do it. But like, I think what he learned and what I had learned from so many data points is that the people we think should be serious and adult and running our organization, like they are just figuring it out too.
Yes.
And they want to work with a sense of wonder and curiosity and like playfulness.
Yes.
Like, and we often assume it's not the case, but it is.
Well, and to take our analogy of kind of the playground thing a little further, is it's so interesting that in leadership, the further you advance, you also become more isolated, and you don't have the resources and the people to back you up. You become, so imagine that little second grader on the playground, getting pushed further and further away from the masses, so to speak, and so many people think that leadership, at that point, if you're a C-suite, you've got all the answers and everything. And to your point, they don't. They don't have all the answers, but yet they're also now even more isolated from people that have the answers.
Oh my goodness, Gary, I think you bring up something that is profound, and I think it is something that we don't understand. Like we sometimes lack upward empathy. Like leaders are taught to sort of empathize down, but like there's a lot of power in like looking at our leaders, whether they're our corporate leaders, school leaders, our political leaders, and like know that they are struggling and they are lonely. And I've done a fair bit of executive coaching, and I think the real reason why most executives need coaches is because it is the loneliest job out there. It's like lonelier than a toll booth worker, because there's no one they can really they have a hard time talking through their problems, because anyone that's available to talk through their problems is kind of part of the problem. It's like, and you don't really like, Gary, I'm having some problems with Mo. Like you can't do that when you lead a team. And it's lonely because people don't tell you the truth. They don't tell you your baby's ugly. You got no clothes, Emperor. Like you get these filtered, distorted views of the world. And so it's so hard
Yes.
for
I-
them to like lead the playground when they, are like alone in the sandbox.
yeah.
How do we turn that around? How do you change that?
Well, and before that, I'm sorry to interject on that. When you were speaking about the C-suite over at Oracle, uh, the humility that they came to you with was huge. I
Big.
think that's, as a matter of fact, I think that's one of the ways that we changed the sandbox right there. Because I've seen over and over again how they do play that card, and they do believe that they have to have the answer and go, I really don't know. It's such a big deal there. But anyway, I'm sorry to interject on that one, but that
No,
was,
you're absolutely right.
yeah.
And a lot of it is just it's that respect. It's
Yeah.
like maybe the more we respect people for what they bring and what they know, the easier is it to say like, but there are things I don't know. And I mean, for me, that was a profound moment. And I was so grateful that Jeff like said, no, like Liz, you're trying to solve the wrong problem.
Mhm.
And it was a pretty big admission. Like, we don't know how to set this strategy, but it was because we had this like working relationship of trust. Um,
Yeah.
It's a safe environment. Yeah, they were willing to be vulnerable. I mean, you were trying to shy away from that word, but I think it's absolutely important. There's a vulnerability. There's a vulnerability in approaching your leaders and joking with them.
Yes.
And I think I don't know, I feel like we're in this transition in leadership in the world where people are still kind of stuck in the old ways where
Mhm.
professionalism equals seriousness, and you know what I mean, and I have to know all the answers and I can't show weakness, and we're in this weird kind of transition stage where good leadership is now having a sense of humor. It is being vulnerable. It is saying, I don't know everything and I need help, and so and anytime there's these big transitions in the world or in whatever, it's such an interesting time. And I feel like we're there. I don't know. Where do you think we are on that continuum, Liz?
well, I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress. And, I think we all have to credit Brene Brown. I know there's a lot of people
Mhm.
who have really kind of moved the needle around people's willingness to be scrappy and vulnerable. Like it's made it okay. Now, I think we are a little maybe over rotated on, okay, let me now be vulnerable. And, it's not like an activity that we do, it's just a way of being. And,
Sure.
what's sort of the kind of modern phraseology of like, hey, keep it real.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. It's like you don't want to be vulnerable just for the sake of being vulnerable. You don't want to be funny just for the sake of being funny, because that doesn't play out well. But when
Yeah.
we just keep it real,
Yeah.
which is like, this is who I really am, I think it allows other people to be real. And, a lot of this I learned as a working mom. And I think when I first had children and was still in the workforce with a big job,
Yeah.
that I'm like, well, I either pretend I don't have a family, like, take down the pictures, and I'm like, I'm all serious, I'm all business, I'm fully committed to Oracle Corporation, which is nonsense. Or I just like, this is who I am. And we might now, maybe this is just crossing the line into slightly inappropriate, but like, I remember these moments where you either like hide who you are or you just embrace it. And this was a moment at Oracle. I'm meeting with the management committee. So these are all the top executives of the company. And we are working on this big, like all manager summit. So we're bringing in like 800 managers from around the world. And there's about 10 of us in the room. I'm the only female in the room. And we're working on this and we're kind of working hard. And I'm like, okay, time out. We need to take a break. Now, at this time, this is like my second or third child. I've got a young nursing, still nursing child. And I'm like, okay, time for us to take a break. I need to go pump. Like, I need to go into the mother's room and pump. I'm like, guys, let's take a break. And they're like, no, let's keep working. I'm like, no, let's take a break. And they're like, no, let's keep working. And then I'm just like, the lactating mother will decide when we take a break. And they're like, we're taking a break. And like these are like little moments where you either like, okay, I'm just gonna like pretend that's not me, and then I'm gonna like suffer, and this is gonna turn into a disaster day, a moment, or you just like, no, this is kind of like, this is who I am, and everybody laughs, and oh, and there just were so many of these moments, and it's not about I'm trying to be funny. It's like, no, here's what's real. Like
Yes.
I gotta go pump, and so
Oh.
let me just tell you that straight up. And everyone laughs, and I think we take ourselves way too seriously. And I think when we just keep it real and keep it light,
Yeah.
humor
I like
naturally
that.
follows, laughter follows, vulnerability follows.
Yep.
And so like when I'm that way with them, it's not that hard for them to say, hey, Liz, we actually don't know how to do this. Can you help?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a natural exchange.
It truly is. And Liz, you brought up something very powerful just a minute ago, and that is hide who you are. Um, I just had lunch with a couple of friends, and they're pretty high up in their organizations. And well, both of them had admitted that they had some emotional health type of things because they had done everything so much for so long, and they had completely wiped out everything of who they truly were. And it's interesting because they were it was one of those situations where they were given leeway, but I don't think they ever were true to who it was that they truly were. So just by you saying that, it just validated a lot of things that are currently going on, why there's a great resignation and all the different things like this. But the other thing too that really struck me is one thing. Do you remember the old show, the Odd Couple?
Mhm.
Yeah, so Tony Randall, Jack Klugman, and for those of you who don't know, because I'm old. Anyway, with that being said, there was one episode where they were in court, and Tony Randall's character pulled out a piece of paper, and he said, "When you assume, you make this out of you and me." And I want to take a look at what are some of the most damaging assumptions you see that people carry, whether leaders or whether it be individuals, that really have a detrimental effect on either personal growth or and even corporate growth. I
Oh,
know
wow.
that.
Well, I'm so glad you asked this for me. In some ways, for me, this is a magic question, because so much of the research I've done is trying to understand like the behavior, the practices of top contributors, of top leaders, environments where people are at their best. And, it's not too hard to figure out what the differences in behavior are, but like the real trick is like, what is the differences in assumption?
Mhm.
Like, what are the beliefs that produce that behavior?
Right.
And what's powerful is to understand the assumptions that we're operating under. So when we look at leaders who bring out the best versus bring out the worst in others, and worst in others is not like bringing out like, tantrum throwing,
Yeah.
backbiting behavior, is that people who can only contribute a fraction of their true capability around, like usually the assumption that the leader is holding is that people aren't going to figure it out without me.
Mhm.
It's not this assumption that like, oh, I'm surrounded by idiots, nobody knows what to do, people are lazy, people don't care. I mean, we know leaders who operate that way, but we find that like the damage done inside organizations is when leaders assume
Mhm.
that the people aren't fully capable without them.
Them. Yeah.
And you think about it, it's probably like clearest if you go into the parenting world, which is like what happens in a family when we assume that our kids aren't going to figure it out without us,
Yes. Yes.
versus like I can be part of them figuring it out, but they just might be able to figure this out. And so this difference in assumption, like when we assume that no one's going to figure it out without me, we tend to rescue people too soon. We
Mhm.
tend to protect people from difficult situations. We tend to like micromanage at the first sign of trouble. We tend to like rev everything and make everything better rather than letting people's work stand
Mhm.
as is. And it ends up having this diminishing effect, often what I call this accidental diminishing effect, meaning
Mhm.
I'm just trying to help. Like I'm supporting you. Like I'm going to help you with this tough thing because like I care about you and I want you to be successful. And when I help you, when you're struggling, it's a clear indication that I got your back. I'm here to support you. But every time we help someone
Mhm.
who's struggling with a tough piece of work, like what's the real message that gets sent?
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
point.
I'm not capable or something to that impact.
You
Yeah.
can't do it. You can't do it without me.
Mhm.
So we find like that is kind of the damning assumption that we can hold as leaders. And I use that term damning for a reason. It's like it dams
Yeah.
up and stops people from being able to contribute
Yeah.
at their fullest.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll add into there another sort of damning assumption is that like hard work, we have to be very serious about it. And we've
Mhm.
talked about that, have we
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
On the contribution side, like when people are, coming into work, like sort of the damning assumption that we find that keeps people stuck in like contributor mode rather than what I call impact player mode
Yes.
is this assumption that I need to stay on my lane. I need
Mm.
to do my job. Whereas
Mhm.
like the impact players don't do their jobs per se, they do the job that needs to be done. And like we all know the difference of someone who's like, well, I'm doing my job, but like, they
Yes.
don't see what's happening around
Yes.
them. Like,
Yeah.
that's not the job to be done right
Yes.
now. Like over here, clean up on aisle 7
Yeah.
and the really valuable contributors are over there on aisle 7. Like, okay, we have an issue, let's flow there. It's this assumption that I need to wait for permission.
Mm.
I need
Oh man.
I
Yes.
need to be invited to the meeting in order to contribute to the meeting. I need to wait for formal authority before I take charge of a situation. I need to be
Yeah.
asked, invited. I need to like stick to what I'm good at.
Yes.
And
Yes.
these are all assumptions that keep people like stuck in positions rather than making a difference.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is okay. I again, I said it at the beginning. I am going to say it again. I am geeking out. Oh, yes, I studied Ardress back in the day. And
Yeah,
for
sure.
those of you who don't know who Ardress is, you're one of millions that probably don't know what it is, but it just did seminal work on something called ladder of inference and assumptions. And just hearing the way that you damning assumptions, wow. You just validated so many things that I would myself was assuming, but just to know that it's very prevalent in a number of different places. And I guess that's why I love coaching rugby so much, is because it flows from player to player in every different position. And it has to be orchestrated in a manner that if they don't break out of their lane, they won't be successful.
Mm.
And I think we have, again, learning a lot from those kids. But wow, Liz, I don't even know what to say. Wow.
I think it's one of the things I try to do is focus more on my assumptions than my behavior because the behavior, not like if we really authentically like believe something,
Yes,
we tend to do the right things.
right, right.
And it's kind of like I went to this Zumba class. It was like my first time at a Zumba class. Have either of you two done Zumba?
I have not.
So this is my first time. It was also my last time going to Zumba. Disaster at Zumba. And so like my friend's like, hey, let's go to Zumba. It'll be fun. I'm like, I don't think it will be, but I'll go, And so I go and I'm doing this, and it's like this sort of hour-long class, and about 55 minutes into it, like the instructor, I think she'd been looking at me like it's like Latin jazzercise. It's like very dancey exercise. And I'm moving, but I'm like going in the wrong direction. Everyone's going left, I'm going right. And she kind of looks at the class, but looks at me and she's like, watch my knees. Because this is like very Latin, very kind of
Right. Right.
like, watch my knees, like do what. And I'm like, your knees? I got problems with my arms and my legs. Like, it's all this that's not going in the right direction. And she said, watch my knees. And so I started to watch her knees and I'm like, oh, wow. Like, and I just sort of made my knees do what her knees were doing. And then like suddenly like my hips follow and then my shoulders are like, and it's all working. And I'm like, oh yeah, like that's what creates all the rest of the movement.
Yeah.
And there's probably an equivalent in rugby.
Yeah.
It's like where you point yourself. And like with skiing, it's like, you point your hips
Yeah.
down the mountain and the rest of your body kind of gets in the right place. And I think it's like this at work, which is if we get our assumptions pointed in the right direction, like we don't have to do a lot of management training and
No.
go to a lot of classes. Like the right things just naturally follow.
Oh my goodness. You just make it so fluid. I love it.
You didn't see me at Zumba. I have to say, I wish I had known you years earlier, because I always tell people like I have the soul of a ballerina, but
Yeah.
like the body of a rugby player. It's just like God's curse on me. And yeah, I was built for rugby. I wish I knew you 30 years ago.
Yeah. So I have a question, and I think this kind of jumps back a little bit in the whole leadership equation. Is are we pulling people and the right people into leadership positions? Because it just seems historically that you take your highest performer that's doing the best job, and we just assume that that guy is going to be the best leader. And so many times I've seen those people crash and burn like hard. They just want to go back and excel at what they were really good at. What can you talk about that a little bit, as far as, when we're looking to promote leaders, what are we looking for? How do we do that effectively?
Well, we do tend to promote people who are good at the job. And then it sometimes takes them anywhere from, like for me, it was a good 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, they figured out in 6 days. Other people, like, I don't know, 6 years, decades pass, they never figure out, which is like, it's no longer about you.
Sure.
No longer about you. And I was like hardened. It took me a while to figure this out. I remember a couple moments, but one of them was when my boss, I'm a new manager, he came by, sat down in my office, and he said, Liz, if you want, you can sit in your office and read novels all day long. As long as your team's doing what they need to do, like you can read novels. And I'm like, what is wrong with him? I'm not going to read novels. Like, I don't read a lot of fiction, but like, why would I do that? Like my work ethic, it like made me itchy in terms of this work ethic. But what he was trying to say is, it's not your productivity that matters. It's not your ideas that matter. Like what your job is to get productivity, performance, capability from your team. And he was trying to help me see that. I was a little dense, with that. But so you could say, well, yeah, we need leaders who are not self-absorbed, who can focus on other people, who can spend their time spotting the genius and capability of others and putting it to use, and leaders who ask the right questions and let other people find the right answers, the leaders who don't just delegate work, they like lay down the right kind of challenge, and then they kind of coach people along the way. But I don't know that there are enough of those people on the planet. I think it's something like most of us don't come with this natural orientation to do that. We have to learn to do it. And well, I'd like to think that like, oh yeah, this would be great if we like all the managers of the world were these great like kind of multiplier leaders.
Yeah.
We also know people who are technologists and engineers. And I grew up in technology. I grew up at Oracle, where we really had a fair bit of disdain for like the general manager model, like, hey, drop anyone in with a Harvard, business school degree and, some charm, and drop them in and they'll be able to manage like a group of software architects.
Yeah, not
It's
going to
not,
work.
it doesn't work. Like, there are lots of jobs where you have to have a deep understanding of the technology, so like how far to push, like what's possible, the right questions to ask. So what I think we need are people who are willing to bring their own intellect and genius and capability,
Mhm.
but then say, okay, I'm now switching,
Yeah,
and it's time for me to be the genius maker on the team. And it's a shift in orientation, and it's like the shift you have to go through as parents. Like, I remember when, like, my daughter said to me, her friends are in the car, I'm driving carpool, and I'm chatting with her friends, we drop them off, and she says to me, Mom, those are my friends, not your friends.
Ouch.
Ouch. And what she's like is like, you already had your teenage years, quit trying to be like fun and popular. And she's like, this is now my life. And I'm like, oh, that's right, I already did high school. I'm now supposed to step back and help her do high school.
Wow.
What a great analogy.
That is that explains so much now, at least of what I'm going through with my teens.
But there are those shifts. That is really,
Yeah.
this has just been a fantastic discussion, because there's so many things that stand alone, but yet it's like this recipe for amazing leadership, that when you start
Yes.
putting these all together, it's, it just paints a picture, like that amazing
Really
picture
does.
behind you that I talked about earlier.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Liz. I first of all, I cannot thank you enough for making this time, because you are so busy. But this was so not only fun, but just so enlightening. I feel better, and I guarantee you, the first thing I'm going to tell my rugby team today is, we talked about you guys today. And I can't wait, because so many people can learn from everything you said. I'm going to share it with their parents as well. But what a fantastic education that I know personally I've received today. It just, wow.
100%. 100%.
But is there anything we could do for you? I mean, you're doing everything for everybody. Anything that we could do for you?
Oh, I don't know, just keep people laughing. I mean, we kind of started our conversation this way, and I mean, we're dealing with some really tough stuff right now. And I think there's a lot of people who are on this roller coaster of, okay, my job matters. I like my job. I'm going to work. I'm going to make things happen. And then you have days like, why am I doing any of this? Like,
Yeah.
honestly, it feels like the world's falling apart to, some extent. And like, does this matter? Do I matter? And like, it's heavy and hard, I think, for a lot of people, where work used to come so easily and now it's labored,
Yes.
I think. And I think having the sense of lightness
Yes.
will help all of us through this. So you two just keep everyone laughing.
You got it. Liz. Well, thank you so much for your time again.
It's just my pleasure to hang out with you.